Welcome back to Sprague Homestead. What are you doing?
Well, this is hard to start because it's so darn heavy, but I found this great tip, this life hack off the internet about how to really do it this way. And I think it's really going to be great.
No.
And that, my friends, is exactly why the internet can be a really dangerous place to new homesteaders. So as Nikki said, welcome back to Sprague Homestead. Today we kind of want to touch the subject of how the internet can be really dangerous for new homesteaders out there. So the first thing we want to talk about is really the advice that people give based on the experiences they never really have had.
So I'm on a lot more Facebook groups for homesteading than this guy. So I see a lot of stuff that I'm like, no. It always seems to be that it's people that either are really, really new to homesteading and have no background in it whatsoever, or people that are, I swear, just want to be the center of attention, right? So they're giving people advice on subject matters they know nothing about. So to kind of give an example of this, one that is a major pet peeve of mine is LGDs, and people always suggesting LGDs for people who really don't need them. So last year I got into this argument with a guy who started off telling this woman that she needed llamas for guards because he heard they were excellent guards. Well, what you probably don't know because we don't really talk about it, I've actually had llamas since 1993. So kind of been around the bush when it comes to the llamas. And not every llama actually will guard. That's a major misconception that you see in all these articles. Not every llama has the aptitude. Not every llama will bond to smaller stock. So this guy starts telling this gal, oh yeah, you got to get llamas. So I interject and I say, no, that's not really right. So then he comes back with donkeys. What you need is donkeys. Well, the gal's having trouble with like coyotes and bobcats and mountain lions. Well, if you don't know anything about donkeys, I guess you've probably seen these articles where they say, donkeys, great guard animal. Donkeys, no guard. Donkeys are territorial and will guard their territory, but they don't actually guard anything. So, especially when it comes to a mountain lion, right? Because donkeys are just as likely to get eaten as the things that you've got them guarding. So in the course of this discussion with this guy who's telling me I don't know anything, that keep in mind I've owned donkeys, llamas, and LGD dogs, which is what I told her to get, it comes out that, well, he's never actually raised any of this. He's never raised a goat, he's never raised a sheep, he's never owned a llama, he's never even seen a donkey in real life, and doesn't have an LGD. In fact, he's still living in the suburbs. And he's telling people stuff with the authority of somebody who's got 20 years of experience. And this is where we find out so many people online, this is the case.
So how is it dangerous for new homesteaders? Well, a lot of times people that speak with authority and speak the loudest online with all caps actually have never done anything they're talking about, but they heard, they read, or they've seen something from somebody that actually has.
It's kind of one of those things that a new homesteader that sees this information doesn't know what you don't know what you don't know, right? So if somebody's telling you, absolutely, this is what you need to get, and here's why, you gotta assume they probably know what they're talking about. Yeah, beware, this is not always the case.
So the next reason the internet can be very dangerous for new homesteaders is that a lot of times what you find online is always the best case scenario, and it creates a lot of unrealistic expectations.
We've all seen the posts on Instagram, right, where people are like, look at my garden, look at my goats, look at the, and they never show you when the squirrel gets in and eats half the garden, or, you know, the goat sticks its head through the fence and tears an ear. You don't see any of the nitty gritty, right? So a lot of times new homesteaders, when they start to have these problems that we all have at some point, right? The chickens start pecking each other or whatever happens, they feel like a monumental failure because the internet is telling you nobody else is making these mistakes.
And that's reason 2 why the internet can be dangerous to new homesteaders. Now, thankfully, it's spring right now, so people are starting to get the fever and get into the trends. So everybody's watching social media, they're watching the magazines, everything online. What's the new trend? What's the new trend? The trouble with the new trend is, a lot of time it gets you sucked into something that's really not meant for you.
And I see this all the time on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook all the time of whatever is the new hotness. A few years ago, it was quail. A lot of people didn't like dealing with butchering quail because quail are, even the jumbo quail, not very big, right? So, like right now, the big thing that I'm seeing once again is everybody saying that you got to have LGDs if you're going to raise stuff. Please don't do that. Most of you don't even need an LGD. There's that. Pasturing rabbits, which we'll talk about in an upcoming video. This does not work for everybody. But a lot of people get sucked into these things of, well, everybody else is doing it. Milk cows is another thing that we keep seeing all the time. People that are like a family of 2 and 3 that think they need a Jersey. I don't know if you know how much milk a Jersey puts out, but it's a lot more than 2 or 3 people can drink in a day. So you got to be really careful about the things that you see online and kind of hold back and say, is this really what I want, and does it fit with my lifestyle? Because a lot of new homesteaders don't necessarily know to do that. They get sucked into these things because they think this is what everybody else is doing, like the mega-sized gardens, and then they find out they really can't do it.
And that's why the internet can be dangerous to new homesteaders. So now, as Nikki said, she spends a lot more time in Facebook groups concerning homesteading and sustainability than I do. I am in other groups in that, but I can tell you a common theme between both of them is that if you ask one question, you get 30 opinions, and they never, ever tell you the same information.
And this can be really kind of confusing for a new homesteader that legitimately goes online looking for information. And it's not just on Facebook groups. We see it on YouTube a lot, where you'll watch one video about raising rabbits, like one of ours. You'll go on to the next guy, and he's doing something completely different. Now, we both might be right, we both might be wrong, but how is a new homesteader to know this?
Always hard to figure out, but that is exactly why the internet can be dangerous to new homesteaders. So now, if you guys have watched a lot of our content, you know that we kind of live in an arid, kind of high desert area. So what works for us a lot of times is gardening and greenhousing and all that stuff. What may work for somebody in Kansas or Virginia, it's probably not the same thing.
And, you know, we see this a lot, especially, I think the biggest thing that we keep getting over and over again is the pasturing of rabbits and the pasturing of poultry. Well, you know, it's great in theory, and I've done it at other properties, but for me here, I can't do it at all. We have tularemia in the ground, which makes the rabbit thing on pasture pretty much impossible, and we don't have enough grass to pasture poultry. So for us, it doesn't work. But people go online, and the reason I bring that up is because we've got a lot of new homesteaders here locally to us, and that's one of the first things that I always get a question about is, well, how do you do that here? You can't. I mean, it's a great theory, and I love that, you know, everybody cites Joel Salatin, who I admire greatly. The things he does there in Virginia on the other side of the country do not necessarily work in Sprague River. I'm not saying all of it doesn't work, but a lot of it doesn't work here. We see this in regenerative agriculture, so I'm watching a lot of regenerative agriculture videos, trying to get some inspiration for our other 40 acres, and a lot of the things that people are talking about, the big names in regenerative agriculture are farming in Ohio, in other parts of the Midwest, like I said, Salatin in Virginia, Alan Savory, who is in parts of Africa. I mean, so you've got a whole different geography, and so what they're doing, while some of it works, not all of it works. So you got to be really careful if you're a new homesteader into watching a video and thinking, yeah, that's what I'm going to do, because it might not work for you.
And that is why the internet can be dangerous to new homesteaders. Now, I will say a lot of days I do like looking Instagram and stuff for the passions that I have. Nikki is no different. She likes looking at her stuff. The trouble with the internet is it can stifle your creativity because you're always looking at what other people are doing and thinking, ooh, I want to do that too.
Yeah, I see this a lot in chicken houses and everything else. I mean, it used to be 20 years ago. Now, I'm at that age now, right? I can start to do this 20 years ago thing. 20 years ago, it seemed like everybody had a different chicken house, right? Like everybody just built what they needed for themselves. This is not the case anymore. I see so much cookie cutter stuff of, well, I saw it on the internet. And maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. And this kind of goes back to the other one too of not everything works for everybody, right? So I see these people that go and we're going to build rabbit tractors like the Salatins, and they don't work where you're at. Or we're going to do open air barns and you get 4 feet of snow that blows in the winter. So not everything works, but people get so caught into this mentality of, I saw it on the internet and it worked for that guy. So instead of thinking outside the box as to what's going to work for me, I'm going to do exactly what he does. And then they don't understand and they just deal with it. It's like they get so hung up in this idea that this is what it's supposed to be that they forget to use their own creativity and make it work for them.
So now you're probably asking yourself, well, I'm a new homesteader. Where am I supposed to get my information? The internet's dangerous.
There's nothing wrong with being online, right? We've all been there. What I would suggest is if you see a theory, maybe really research it. And I know that sounds bad of saying, well, I saw it on Facebook, so I'm going to go to Google and see if it's right. But if you get some kind of consensus, that might help. I'm an old-fashioned gal. I like books. So books, look for other homesteaders in your area. This is what we're starting to see. A lot of people that are moving here locally are hitting us up, asking us questions because we've made it work here now for 6 years. So we feel like we're kind of ahead of the curve a little bit as to what works and what doesn't. YouTube is fine, but just maybe get some kind of consensus on it. If it sounds funny to you, it might not be the truth. What do you think?
I think it's good. Find a consensus, and I know that's going to be hard to do. Believe me, I understand that. I've seen it enough where we've been around enough on a certain topics and we still see how many different ways to skin an apple. I mean, there are a lot, and I swear some people try it with spoons, but it doesn't work that way. So, yes, get a consensus, do a lot of research, ask a lot of questions, and, experiment. You got to get out there, get your hands in the soil. You've got to make your own mistakes, unfortunately. That is the worst part about this. You've got to get out there and make the mistakes and really learn what is and is not going to work for you. Sometimes it may take try number 17 to finally get that tomato to grow, and that's just the way it is.
Been there.
But on try 17, when it does work, you are going to be a champion.
And so sick of looking at tomatoes by the end of the year, it's crazy.
So, there again, be cautious on the internet. And what's the key word?
Happy homesteading.
We'll see you next time.